How's it going, guys? So in this video I'm going to be going through some of the muscle memory and aim training techniques and exercises that I've been using lately to try and improve on my aim accuracy and consistency. So before we get into that though, one thing I do want to go through is some of the options. So in the video options, you should guys be running display performance stats on. Now this actually shows your frame rate as well as your ping and some other stats in the top left hand corner. Now, one thing that I found with Overwatch is that your aim sensitivity is actually somewhat linked to your frame rate. So if you're finding your frame rate is being inconsistent and dropping below 100 frames per second, you're actually going to find that your sensitivity is going to change as you're running around. So obviously this is going to create issues when you try and build up muscle memory and your sense is changing, because then your aim and how you flick around is going to be changing as well. Now, in my option settings, typically I'm still running on texture quality and texture filtering quality on high, because I'm not really noticing any sort of performance drop in how it's actually performing. So I'm still hitting consistently above 150 plus frames per second. Normally I'd run these textures on low, just to try to reduce the visual noise and how long it takes for my brain to be able to calculate seeing an enemy and discerning it from the background. But the way that Overwatch's textures are made, it's actually pretty easy to do this as it is. So I'm not really noticing a difference there in my reaction speeds or anything like that. Pretty much everything else I have on low except for effects detail, because again, I like it to look pretty, but I don't really seem to notice much of a performance detriment. And keeping that on ultra. Other than that, pretty much everything else I like to keep on low. So in this first exercise that we'll be doing, you're going to be going and moving your aim from one target to another. So when you're doing that, you're going to be finding that your aim is either going to be under or overshooting the target as you're getting used to moving your aim around. When you're doing this, what you should be doing is coming back into the controls menu here and adjusting your sensitivity to try to reduce the under or overshoot as much as possible. Once you find a happy medium, you can leave it at that, and that's going to be the sensitivity you're going to use pretty much for the rest of the game. Now, in the options up here in all heroes, you can see they've got separate ones for each character. Now, Ana and Widowmaker have a separate sensitivity slider for their scopes, being the only characters currently that have them. This sensitivity slider makes it so that when scoped in, you're only using a percentage of what your actual aim sensitivity is. So that means when you're scoped in, you're actually going to have a different sense than when you're scoped out. So personally, I prefer to actually reduce this to 0, so that when I'm practicing on any character, my aim is always going to be consistent across all the different heroes. Now with the crosshair, I suppose it's probably more personal preference, and I found my aim is a little more consistent when I'm just using the straight up dot. Anything like the dot with the circles or the crosshairs, I find that having that little bit of extra room on the outside tends to make things a little distracting. Occasionally you might find you'll be aiming with the wrong part of your crosshair, and just in general it's just a little more distracting, whereas if I'm with the dot I'm just focusing more on the target as opposed to like what's going on with my crosshair. But that just comes down to straight up personal preference in the end. Alright, so what we're going to end up doing now is going into training, and I'm going to take you through some of the exercises that I've been using to improve and sharpen your aim. Alright, so let's get a bit into the training map. Pick whichever hero you happen to be wanting to practice with, and we'll head straight in. So the first routine that I usually go through is something that I used to do back when I was trying to improve my aim for playing comp and Counter-Strike. So in that particular one we had an actual map that had a grid of squares like lined up on a wall. So the idea being that you would center your crosshair on the center dot and then flick your aim to the outside dots. Essentially trying to train your brain to recognize the head of the target as it's coming around the corner, and then being able to snap straight to it. So you're sort of training your muscle to get used to going from whatever you happen to be looking at straight to a target and being able to click as you're doing it. So my usual first routine is just come and stand at this particular spot, and I'll go look at these targets, just putting my crosshair at the center point and then moving back and forth. So start off real slow like I did at the start, and then pick up your aim, your speed, as you're getting a little more comfortable and finding you're consistently hitting dot each and every time. So I usually start with one side, going from center, quickly flicking to the outside and then coming back. You just start with right and just work back and forth for a little bit, and then when you're a little more comfortable you can start to move to your left side, go from center to left after that. So for these ones you can, this particular spot, you've got the target in the center and then one on either side. Usually for the mid-range I'll also use those warning lights as targets as well. This is flicking your aim back and forth, back and forth. Now I'm only picking up speed when you're actually comfortably hitting the center of the target pretty much every single time. Now one thing you can do is actually unbinding your shoot key so that you can just click without it actually firing your gun, just to get used to actually clicking as your crosshair hits the target, but not having to like deal with the reload and all that other crap. So starting with going from center to right or center to left and then vice versa, then you can move to aiming to the top light up there and then working around to flicking at like diagonal angles, going from the light to the smaller light or from the light to the targets, and just working back and forth in patterns, just trying to get your aim to the point where it's like comfortable and actually snapping accurately from a target to another target. So I'll usually do this for about 15 minutes straight until I'm comfortably snapping the whole time before I actually move on to something else. So this is probably the most boring way to do it, but it also tends to get the best results the fastest. So if you're just doing that a little bit every day, you'll find yourself getting better at it. And if you're wanting just small movements, these targets at the back wall here are actually pretty good. Now, moving around, like getting closer or further away, also changes the distance from each target, so you can sort of work the different distances, I guess, depending on what you want to do. So if you want to be doing like wide sweeping arcs, you can get like really close to the targets behind you there. So the next one, I'm essentially just trying to work on being able to flick and hit a target as it's moving around. So in particular with the case with McCree, your headshot will typically put them on very little health. So one body shot after snapping to the head should be enough to kill them. So the idea is that if the target suddenly appears in your field of view, you should be able to snap and hit them in the head at least once. And then after that, all you have to do is line up a body shot and you can just finish them off. So I'll probably run around and do this for sometimes up to half an hour, just running around, flicking headshots as much as I can. Yeah, doing little ones, so I'm not having to move too much. Now I'm away from my center point and snapping, and then ones where they're like almost at the edge of my screen and I'm doing like almost like a full, what would be like 45-degree snap, just trying to see if I can accurately, quickly flick and then shoot them in the head. So as I guess this kind of practice is only relevant for certain characters, mostly ones with single shot damage like McCree or Widowmaker or something like that. Your training, I guess, will vary a little bit, but doing something like this is handy just in general, being able to quickly snap to a target. So yeah, probably about half an hour of this, and then I move on to something else. Yeah, so the next routine of the set, this one I'm mostly just focusing on trying to consistently land shots while I'm running around. In particular, being able to transition from shooting one target and then moving straight to the next one and consistently hitting every shot. My aim for this particular one is just consistency, so being able to just shoot and hit pretty much every single time, regardless of whether it's a headshot or a body shot. I'm focusing mostly on hitting headshots, but if I have to, like body shots are perfectly just fine. Yeah, the main point is mostly just being able to move around and comfortably be able to just move your aim from one target to the next, firing off shots, reloading, and still being able to hit consistently as I'm moving around. Now for this routine, all I'm pretty much trying to do here is just keep my aim up, centered on the target as I'm moving around. This is something that's useful for most hit scan heroes, but in particular ones like Soldier 76 that require you to be able to consistently lay down fire and actually hit accurately. So I'm not actually really going to shoot anything for this one. All I'm trying to do is be able to sort of duck and weave and strafe around, but keep my crosshair centered on the target for as long as possible. Being able to move around erratically, jumping around quickly, like twitch strafing back and forth while still being able to keep your crosshair lined up with the enemy target. Not always easy to do, so it's definitely something that's worth practicing. Especially if you like to name like Soldier 76 or like May or something that requires you to actually keep sustained contact with the target as you're moving around. Yeah, it depends on how much you want to do for this one. I don't know, like another 15 minutes. Probably doesn't hurt for this particular exercise. Alright, so this exercise it's essentially corner hugging. So the idea is that if you are rounding corners, going into a new area, going through some doors, whatever you want to be doing, you want to be keeping your crosshair lined up with where the enemy is going to be. As you get more comfortable with maps, you're going to learn the typical places that the enemy's probably going to be standing if they're waiting for you at the next point. So you push the payload to the next objective point, and the enemy's going to be waiting on the other side, standing around waiting for you. So whenever you're transitioning around a corner, strafing around, you should be keeping your crosshair pretty much locked on the edge of the corner, so that as you're coming around, as soon as the enemy appears around the corner, your crosshair is pretty much already lined up with where they're going to be. So typically I will try to keep my crosshair lined up with roughly about where head height should be. Obviously each character has a different head height line, because all the characters have different heights. But if you keep sort of like a happy medium, you are not going to have to move your mouse too much. You got to flick straight to where their head are. So for this spot here, for example, that's roughly about where my head is when I'm standing. So I try to strafe and bring my aim up and around so that I'm always aiming roughly at head height as I'm coming around the corners. So you can do this one for as long as you like, but the idea is to be able to get, essentially almost make it look like your crosshair is like actually physically locked onto the edge of the wall as you're running around. Getting it looking nice and smooth so you can transition between strafing back and forth and being able to keep your mouse roughly on point. Alright, so this last exercise is mostly applicable to ranged heroes like Widowmaker or Ana or something like that, but it still has its use for helping you to practice tracking as you're moving around. So the platform, particularly when it's going sideways, has a tendency to tip your aim back and forth as you move around. So having to deal with the fact that you're moving in a certain direction while your targets are moving around by themselves. Now, it seems like it's pretty simple because of how slow the platform is moving, but it actually makes it surprisingly difficult in some cases to hit your target consistently. So I suppose this is a way of helping you learn to hit a target when it's moving in an unusual direction. So I'll usually just sit on this platform and just go around in circles and just try to be as consistent as possible. Not really mattering about like so much as hitting headshots as it is just being consistently able to hit my target. Yes, that's pretty much it. I try to do these exercises pretty much every day. Now, it's good to do these before you start playing, so if you're going to jump on and play couple of quick matches or something like that, I'm just getting on at the very least, just doing a little bit of the wall target muscle memory, just snapping your aim back and forth, try to warm the muscles up. You will find that as you do it more often, your aim will become a little more consistent, but especially at the start, you're going to find that like one day you've done like a session, and your aim's pretty much on point, you're having a good time, get up the next day and your aim's gone to completely to shit. So it's good to warm up with these kind of exercises before you start playing, and you'll find you'll have a little more consistent aim, I guess, when you're doing it. It doesn't really matter how much time you spend doing it, but obviously the more time you do spend, the better you're going to get, like more quickly. So as long as you're doing it like every day, you're going to quickly notice some good results from this.